Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be, and whether you're watching live or archived. And welcome to episode number 54 of the Nautel Transmission Talk Tuesday webinar series. I'm Jeff Welton, and we're going to have some fun today. And you notice I got through that whole thing without glancing that 6 inches to the left to see what number we were on. Of course, it doesn't help or hurt that my guest reminded me the episode number before. Speaking of that, I'm happy to announce that I've got Dan Gunter from Alabama Broadcast Services is with us today. And Thanksgiving's coming up in the U.S. I'm lucky, see, I'm Canadian, but I've got a Wisconsin-born wife, so we celebrate both holidays. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things we can do to avoid keeping the phone from ringing. Obviously, 2 days before Thanksgiving, we're getting a little late for it now, Dan, but hopefully we get some ideas for folks for next year. Thanks for joining me today.
It's good to be with you, Jeff. And you opened that up like you have practiced it once or twice.
Well, 54 times counting today. If you go back, and it's funny because the other day I was going back, by the way, folks, these are archived, and I was going back through some of the archives the other day, and it was not nearly as smooth or polished through episodes 1 through 51, or I don't know. I'm not sure where. I wouldn't say I got good at it yet, but I suck less. There you go. That's the way I'm wording it. So mandatory housekeeping stuff before we get rolling. I see a lot of names that are pretty familiar in the list. There are one or two that I don't see on a regular basis. If you're new to us, we do encourage your contributions, criticisms, concerns, questions, comments, sarcasm, snark. I got all that out without taking a breath, but now we're going to pause. Anyway, type that stuff in the little question box, hit the little send button, and it'll pop up on my screen. I see Elaine and Jerry have both mentioned make comments in there. So absolutely throw that in there. We'll make it part of the conversation. If you've got a microphone and you're not shy, feel free to hit the little hand wavy icon up there on the screen where it says muted on the picture. And you hit that, it'll pop a little alert up on my screen. We'll unmute you and make you part of the conversation. So have a little fun. If you're an SBE member and you've got a certification status, then by all means, our Nautel webinars do qualify for half of a recertification credit under category I. By all means, whatever you scribble that stuff down in notepad, notebook, Excel spreadsheet, keep track of it. It reminds me that my certification's up in January, so it might be time to start keeping score on my own. But regardless, happy to have you with us. So like I said, Thanksgiving is the holiday that's coming up in the U.S. and there's the first big thing we talk a lot about doing visual inspection. So the way this is kind of worked up, Dan sent me a bucket load of photos, things he's seen over the years. And now I hope it's over the years and not over the past few months, Dan, that there was over a period of time at least. But
most of them were within about the last 2 years.
All right, so some period of time, but we're going to basically discuss the photos and war stories and talk about ways to avoid the things that make the phone ring during holiday dinner. One of the first things is, of course, visual inspections, and I'm here to tell you if you're going to put a cake up in your bakery section, you might want to do a visual inspection from a bird's eye view before you put it out on the shelf. That credit to this photo to Tom Ray up in the Northeast. Tom posted this on Facebook, and once it goes on Facebook, of course, nothing is sacred. Speaking of Facebook, I do a Tuesday tip thing that Fiona puts on all our social media. Coincidentally, we're in the middle of a horrendous rainstorm and windstorm. It's starting to wind down now, and knock on wood, our lights stayed on, but 20,000 other people weren't so fortunate. But it reminded me, this came up this morning in our social media feeds, and reminded me that it's been much longer than it should be since I load tested our generator at the house here last. That is the transfer panel for my house. Dan, you were talking about you've got 2 generators at your place, and one of them is pretty frequently tested.
Yeah, we've got one that it exercises itself every week, but not under load. But because we live in Alabama, we get thunderstorms and everything pretty much year round. And so it usually doesn't go more than a month, maybe 2 months at the most without actually running under load. But
Yeah.
I try to keep an eye on it. One of them has a self-start problem, so I have to run out there with the battery and jumper cables after the fact and fire it up. But the one that covers the main part of the house, covers the freezers and all the critical stuff, well, I always know that it's working well. I keep a close eye on it.
Yeah, and that's what I say. Mine's electric start, but manual switch. And I'm ashamed to say that I'm willing to bet that if I ran out there now and hit the button, that it probably would not start until I put the charger on it for a little while, which of course isn't going to happen if the power's out. So yeah, that'd be pulling the truck into the enclosure and boosting it. And yeah, absolutely. That's a really good thing though, is that these things do need to be tested on a regular basis. Now, some things too, and the next slide is a good example. This is something, again, I'm up here in the frozen Northlands, and we do a lot more of forced air cooling, although there are a lot of sites now that are air conditioned, and air conditioners come with their own specific maintenance challenges.
Oh, yes. This site, kind of preface it, this was at an FM site down in Georgia. And to kind of jump down to the bottom right photo, you can see the back side of an old CCA transmitter. It's in a small building. That's the only thing running in there other than just the, ancillary electronics. And that building would get so hot that one time the air conditioner failed. And when it did, they lost over $7,000 worth of parts. All of the front panel meters literally melted down before the transmitter actually failed. And so we vented it, but what you see in the middle there is a temperature monitor, alerting system. It's all built on an Arduino, and also ties to the interlock on the transmitter so that if the temp goes above a certain range, I get an alert. If it goes above a danger range, it will shut it down. And ironically, the day that I went down there to put that thing in, if you look at the top left photo, that's the underside of the coils in the air conditioner system. And what called my attention to that was the air filter was a big soggy heap lying in the floor below that. It had
Shoot.
frozen up that morning because a blower went out. And if you look to the top right there, you'll see the nice big snowball, ice ball that built up on the Freon line. And you can look in that bottom left photo and see that the entire compressor was frozen up. And
Yep.
so I had just, when the photo in the center there was taken, I just hooked that thing up, hung the temperature probe, and you could see that it was well above the alarm and shutdown range. The AC guys, I got all that hooked up. There's nothing I could do. The AC guys got out there the next day, got it fixed, and it cooled down. Transmitter started up. We were good. But
Good deal.
yeah, and that was in what, February when that happened. And that little building, if you look at the walls in there, you'll see that it's that chipboard stuff. They're not very thick. The thermostat is on the wrong wall in the building. It's coupled to the wall. And so, that thing, it acts kind of goofy anyway, but
Yep.
it doesn't take much for that building to get really hot.
And that's one thing that Shane Tobin from Caleb has mentioned, that he's done a similar thing, just similar to your controller. And I've seen this before where you just take a passive, like a Mercury switch thermostat, and use that to trip the interlock in the transmitter if you need to shut things down before you start. I had one site where a guy called me up and he goes, have a problem. And I said, what's that? And he said, compressor failed in the air conditioner. And he said, it got warm in there. And I go, how warm? And he goes, well, when I grabbed the doorknob, it raised blisters on my hand. I said, that's pretty warm. He goes, yeah, the meat thermometer in the air exhaust was measuring 160 Fahrenheit when I got out there, and the meters were starting to drip down the front of the transmitter. I said, yeah, that is toasty. So this is one of those situations where you could get a regular old, just plain vanilla wall thermostat with a mercury contact in it, and just, yeah, use that to interlock the transmitter. That's a good suggestion, Shane. Back on generators, Curtis mentions that running the generator helps gunk from building up, and Exactly, especially if you've got not just a diesel, I mean, any generator, fuel or diesel, if it gas or diesel rather, you've got to circulate the fuel a little bit. But yeah, if you run it a lot more often, it tends to work better, right? That's right, Dan?
Right. And now mine here at the house are LP fired. We have a 300-gallon tank up the hill. And so they come out about twice a year. Fortunately, they almost never have to put more than, a few pounds in it. But
Hmm.
that's even with that, you can tell when you first fire it up that they need to run regular or they will be hard cranking, even the
Yeah.
LPs.
Yeah, and I know that's like I say, the one at the house here, I used to be in the habit of running it every month, and I kind of, this has been a really busy year, so I kind of get off of that habit, but that's going to have to start again, and hopefully today will be my reminder before the lights go out. Now, so we also, there's a running joke, and you see websites and pages devoted to redneck engineering, but I mean, I'm here to tell you I don't consider redneck engineering or there's good engineering and there's less good engineering, and this would probably fall into the latter category.
Absolutely. This is a case where I get a call early one morning. Hey, the AM transmitter's going down. When I try to start it up, the VSWR meter swings full scale and it shuts down with the VSWR alarm. So I go down there.
Mhm.
First time I've eyeballed their what's left of a building for the ATU, and I see the ATU laying in the corner. And the first thing I notice is the little stud over there where the cable screws down to the box. Besides the fact it's laying on the ground with no ground strap really attached to it, I said that connection doesn't look good. But I'm really wondering about the splice and the cable because they had moved this ATU over from another building that had long before collapsed. There's no front door on the building. As you can see, there's not a lot of floor in the building, so there's no weather protection, which didn't help considering that if you look at that right photo. And my thing
Mhm.
about if this was one of those caption this photos, my question that I would put there is, does anyone know the characteristic impedance of a split bolt? I
Yeah.
bet it's not 50 ohms. And what they had done is they had stripped another piece of coax and the one going in there that wasn't long enough to make it to the ATU, split bolted the center conductor together, split bolted the shields together, put a little bit of electrical tape, which the weather, because of the condition of the building, had long since destroyed. And so I reached down and I just took my fingers and pulled those apart and I said, go try starting the transmitter. It stayed on for about another week and a half until we finally got back down there because we had no electrical tape that day, and got that sealed back up. And actually, it's still working that way because we got some other work we've got to do. We're going to replace the building, mount that thing right, and in the process, we're going to terminate that cable and put some connectors on it that I'm sure are much closer to 50 ohms.
Yeah, now, and there's two things that I say there's nothing more permanent than a radio station temporary where we got it working for now and we'll come back and fix it later. And new project, we'll get that done when we have a moment. Um,
Right.
and those are your two. There's nothing guaranteed to be. Yeah, I mean, the running joke has always been, and I've shown pictures of it here before, where the vice grip's holding the AM feed line on, or the grounds together. Um,
Yeah.
so
Share
uh,
that with many people, Jeff. I love them.
so I'm going to make it a point to check in with you on this feed connection in a month or so. We'll see if you get a chance to get back out there and get it squared around. Let's see. Mark says went out to maintain one of our generators and found out last week that certain oil is hard to find due to supply issues. Was not able to find 5W40 synthetic anywhere in northeast Nebraska. Now, that is a good point because, and we're doing, because I don't have enough things to do already, we're doing sales training and sales meetings for the next 2 days. So those take up half of my day. This takes up the other half of the day. And at some point, somebody's going to ask me to do my real job if they ever figure out what it is. But see, if I keep moving like that, we won't have that issue because nobody knows exactly what I do, much less me. But one of our topics was supply chain and delays. And I mean, everybody, of course, has seen the stories where you go to this store, that store, and they're out of bread or they're out of milk or they're out of cat food or whatever. Um, so if you do have anything that what I would call a consumable, things like oil for your generators or sometimes even fuel. It is a good idea to have a certain amount of stock built up, and as you can get more, and then cycle the old stuff through. And fuel is a good idea, a good example. I mean, I use 5-gallon cans of gas out in the shed for the lawnmowers, for the snow blowers, for the generator, for the vehicles, whatever. But what I do, it gets, when I buy it, it'll come into the house, it'll get fuel stabilizer added to it, even though I'm buying premium gas for the small engines. And then after about 3 or 4 months, I'll cycle that through one of the vehicles and fill the gas can again. So you do want to, or like diesel, you need to have the folks come out and what do they call that when they clean the diesel fuel?
Um, well, I mean,
Hit,
we just
hit
had
you with a
a John
challenge.
25 serviced. We got it back and it ran for about 4 hours, and all of a sudden it sounded like the whole thing was going to shake itself apart. Fuel had, I mean, water had gotten mysteriously into the fuel system. And so after
Hmm.
they had it for another month and a half and I got it back, since then I've been going to the parts store down here in the farm supply, and every can of diesel fuel I buy gets a good dose of the fuel treatment, and it's done
Yeah.
really well because I've noticed that you get water in the bottom of that bowl, it will actually let it separate, but it makes it supposedly so that if any of that water does get in there, it becomes viscous, doesn't rust the fuel system, and it can actually burn it out through the fuel.
Okay. Brad and William have both said that treating diesel fuel polishing is the term. So there you go. But yeah, I know that just cycling it through and filtering it and clearing the crud and the other stuff out is part of diesel generator maintenance too. Now beyond that, you sent me, well, and so this is like I say, Dan sent me a bucket load of pictures, and I created a bucket load of slides from them. But oh, there, William Harrison. Yeah, I was thinking polish, but type filter. I have those days too. But this is another thing that catches a lot of folks. The running joke in tech support is always, is it turned on? Is it plugged in? And I've had more calls than I care to share where we spent hours troubleshooting something to discover that we had a 50 kilowatt down in the Caribbean. And they called and it was down, RF drive and PDM drive alarms, and we troubleshot, and it's like there's no power to this exciter. And so we're going backwards, and of course the first question usually asked, is it plugged in? Well, on a 50 kilowatt transmitter that's 14 feet long, 7 feet high, and 4 feet deep, you don't think about, is it plugged in, because you know that the big supplies are hardwired. But the exciters on that transmitter ran off a separate 120 volt feed. And in this case, rather than wiring it to a breaker panel, it was just on an extension cord out back to an electrical outlet that somebody had unplugged to plug in something else. So yeah, is it plugged in is valid. But here you got an example of an air conditioner breaker that is not permanently set at the moment.
Yeah, this was a situation where at a transmitter site you have three different air conditioning systems in there, and it's so noisy on the inside you never really can hear unless you look at thermostats or get close to them, which one's running, which one isn't. And because there's three with independent thermostats, they're cycling on and off a little bit at different times. And I had done my walk around outside the building, everything looked good. I've checked all my transmitters, logged everything. And so I went to walking around looking at all these sub panels, saw that breaker tripped. And it turns
Mhm.
out that the compressor was burned up in that outside unit. And I would not have known it had I not looked over and seen that breaker. So it's like, okay, note to self, don't assume everything's working. Check, visualize every breaker.
Well, and that is a good lead into why we need, and a lot of your other slides will bring this point up too, but we need to do a periodic just swing by and look around visit. When, I mean, the best way to do it, of course, I beat this drum on talking about engineering, uh, I guess, good habits, but is a checklist. Did you look at the breakers? Did you look at the tower? Did you look up the tower to make sure the lights were on and all the cables are attached to it, et cetera, and so on? So, and let's see, William Bowen mentions that if you've got an older generator, 30 plus years, it may not have roller lifters and use flat tappet lifters instead. And these generators must have a zinc additive added to the oil because today's oil doesn't have enough zinc. So that's a good point for you. We may have to do a full session on generator maintenance. It sounds like it could be a fun topic too. Mark Voris mentions feeling breakers to make sure they're not hot, and we'll touch on that because you and of course everybody that knows me knows that I beat the drum on my little FLIR camera, and I see that you're an aficionado of the thermal cameras as well.
Oh yes, I love the FLIR cameras. Just recently bought one surplus from Auburn University in good working order, but it's the size of one of the old video camera camcorders. And although it works great, hardly ever use it because the little FLIR Pro that just plugs into the bottom of the Android phone does an excellent job. The software that they have for it's fantastic because you can do the image overlays, which is very handy when you're trying to figure out there's a hot spot on that AC panel, but which breaker is it? Well, if you do that blended image, it'll outline every breaker, and it's good to have when you go back later and you go, okay, now I'm having a problem with the breaker. Was it this bad before? And you look back and go, nope, wasn't running this hot before.
Yep.
And I actually found a problem with some tower lighting that way. It turned out that in my baseline images, when I went back and looked, the breaker that fed the tower lighting system was the hot spot in the breaker panel. It was hotter than the transmitter.
And that's good stuff to know. So baselines, and again, it comes down to like transmitter meter readings. If you do it on a regular basis, then when you see something different, you're more inclined to catch it than if it's much more sporadic. And just a little plug for next week's Tuesday session. William Harrison's coming in, and we're talking about holiday gift ideas for the engineering type in your life, or in my case, things to put on my Amazon wish list for the real boss to add to the tree, or whatever. But that was, William says, address all gifts to William Harrison. Anyway, that is one of the things that we'll be mentioning there. William sent me a big, long list. He's got a big, his wish list makes my wish list look pretty amateur. So we're going to have some fun there. Now, flipping through the slides, this was another one that kind of intrigued me. So, I mean, condensate filter, I'm guessing. What are we looking at?
Well, that's one of the Andrew, I think that's the XT300. And you walk over and you see water in the condensate bowl. Well, first of all, you think, uh-oh, we're getting moisture in the line. Well, there's almost no perfect rigid transmission line, especially the longer they get. At some point or other, you're going to have some moisture build up. It's almost, unavoidable, especially after a few years. But what was actually going on with this one wasn't that there was a problem so much with the line. We knew it had a pinprick air leak in it. But what was happening is this is one of those systems that has a small regulator there that allows air to flow backwards, and it sprays the water into a little gold pan on top of the compressor head so that the heat from the compressor will just make it evaporate. That regulator had been tightened down too tight, and so there was no backflow, and so that moisture couldn't get out. And so
it just kept building up.
With just an adjustment, if you look in the bottom right corner there, you can see the threads. Once I adjusted the regulator a little bit, all of a sudden that moisture went away. It took a little while, but it was able to push it backwards during the off cycle and evaporate it. So lots of things that can go wrong, but when you see moisture in those, something's wrong somewhere.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not unusual to see when you run it on a really humid day, a little bit of moisture around the edge of it, but then it dries up and goes away. If it's standing like this, you better be looking at what's going on.
Yo. I see Shane Tobin made a comment. We were talking about breakers tripping and things like that, and talking about devices that monitor electric current usage patterns. And Shane, I know you just got back from a trip, but maybe you could unmute yourself and tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So I actually use one of these in my house, and it's caught a couple of things. It's called, the one I use is called Sense. That one automatically detects what types of loads are detected and will give you a picture of what's using what. But it also gives you a really neat graph where you can see things like inrush current when a motor starts. So I can tell if if my air conditioning compressor, for instance, is, maybe starting a little hard, maybe you need to look at that before there is in fact a failure. Works for other devices as well, like the refrigerator or anything else that has a motor in it. But there are other devices as well that are similar in function, but don't have that little artificial intelligence. They'll monitor each circuit individually, or monitor just the main feed. You put basically a current sensor around it, and it ties into your network, and off you go.
Very cool. So these just basically clamp right around the feed into the breaker panel.
Yep, either the main feed into the breaker panel or each individual branch circuit, depending on what particular flavor of these units you have.
Cool. Very, very good. There, I see William's listening. So William, I hope you're jotting down notes for next week's session. Nah, I'm kidding. I'll add that one myself. But I think that just became one of my cool gift ideas. So thanks, Shane. Appreciate that. Getting back to dehydrators and line and stuff, occasionally we do discover, and I noticed none of these are 22 caliber size holes, which are the ones I tend to encounter the most. But lightning forklifts, I had one site, for example, they had 3 lengths of I think it was 600 feet of 3.1/8 line delivered before they got one that wasn't received punctured. So, that's definitely something that you look at. And I mean, the bubble test, that's about the only way to find this, isn't it? You basically search through it with pressure and listening for leaks and looking for bubbles.
Yeah. Of course, if you want to take the cheapy way, like a lot of us do sometimes, I have to recommend Dawn's Ultimate or Dawn Ultra, whatever it is, dish detergent. It makes bubbles better than anything else I've seen mixed with water, except I do go to the heat and air places and buy Cow Blue. Cow Blue comes in a squirt bottle. It's not extremely expensive, and it bubbles a lot better than even the Dawn. But this was a case of the tower crew had come over there to go up and check a microwave dish for me, and he actually spotted this. And I wouldn't chalk this one up to lightning or a gunshot. I would say this probably happened when someone was doing some work on the tower and dropped something.
Hmm.
Which there's another coming up later that's a much more expensive, worse case than this. But you looked at that and you're thinking, okay, is just the jacket messed up, or do we have a problem? And as you can see in the bottom left there, when we cut some of the jacket off, there was a pinhole through there. And this one's on a nitrous tank.
Hmm.
And so nitrous isn't incredibly expensive, but it also doesn't work if you've got a leak and the tank goes dry. So
Yep.
we sealed that one up, got that one fixed, but that's another one of those. Well, this is going to take some time. You're going to have to cut a section out, add connections or something, which creates another maintenance point. And it's another thing that I try to encourage all my clients to have, whether it's corrugated or rigid. If you have the means to do it, put some kind of ice bridge above it, because I have found out that it's amazing how accurately someone 400, 500, 600 feet up a tower can be at throwing a bolt or a nut down and hitting one of these lines dead center.
Hmm. It's almost like some guy named Murphy was in charge of trajectory or something like that.
Yeah, he's
But
alive and well.
yes, but now that is a real good point, though. I mean, any line running across a horizontal stretch should be guarded from the stuff coming down from above one way or another. And even if you're not really in ice country, typically at some point somebody's going to be up that tower. And like you say, if they drop something, it's the same as if you're working on a transmitter and you drop a bolt, it's going to roll to the most inaccessible place. Well, in this case, it's just going to drop right straight down onto the line. So
Yep.
no, that is a really good point there. Now it's funny you'd mentioned the Dawn dish soap because that's the kind we use here too. And I just was doing some gas line work the other day, and it's an amazing leak detector for plumbing and fuel lines too. Um,
It's also great for
what are we?
finding leaks in your tractor tires.
Yes, sir. Or bicycle tires, or just about any other tires. But what are we looking at here?
Okay, well, since we're on the subject of that and people being hyper accurate with dropped objects, when I took over engineering at this station, one of the first things we had to do was replace a 20-foot section of 3 and 1/8 rigid line. And what you have there is where temporarily they fixed it with some rubber tape and clamps, because some guys taking a microwave antenna off of a tower. And let me preface this. Where you're looking at this feed line right here is about 120 horizontal feet away from the base of the tower. Where they took the dish down was about 500-600 feet up the tower.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody managed to drop a bolt. It hit the top of this thing. Nobody knew about it until one day they're getting SWR alarms. The chief operator goes over there. The nitrogen tank is empty. So he goes and hooks the other nitrogen tank up, walks outside, and he hears something hissing. He has to get a step ladder and start looking around. And on top of this piece of the outer portion of this transmission line, you could see a perfect indentation from the threads of the bolt that hit it with a hole at one end.
Nice.
And I'm like, well, first of all, if it had had an ice bridge, that might not have happened. But also, how the heck did you got, what would you say from that height, Jeff? About 359 other possible degrees of azimuth you could have thrown that bolt.
Probably
But
359 3/4, but yeah.
You got the only transmission line going to that tower, and you nailed it.
Yep.
Got to give the guy credit for being accurate.
That's it. And that's one of them ones where, like I say, with the Dawn dish soap, on the Dawn dish soap, Elaine mentions that Dawn dish soap can also be used to wash dishes, although I wouldn't know anything about that.
Well,
actually, that's untrue. I would know about that because if a dish gets washed by hand in this house, it's probably me that washed it. But
a little side
mainly
note
because I
there
dirty
to that, Jeff. Yeah, a little addition to that is, if you're out messing with stuff at a transmitter site and you get your hands all greasy, if you've got a quart spray bottle of Dawn dish detergent water, it will cut grease that a lot of soap won't. So
Yep, there you go. So a little plug for the dish soap. William says that that 1 degree or half a degree of accuracy on a thrown bolt is why you throw the whole handful of bolts at once, because at least some of them will miss the coax. Got you with your mouth full. All right, now a topic near and dear to my heart, grounding. And I do have to say, on the top picture, I do like the fact that they painted the ground strap to make it a little less shiny, because these days that's critical for just about anything outdoors.
absolutely, this is a case where a client has a low power television station, and he had bought all new shiny transmitter filters, it's bandpass filters. He was all excited about getting it up on that tower. And so I go down there to size everything up. I said, I won't hook it up for you. And he looks at me and says, what? I said, not until we get some grounding, because the electrical panel, which was in that bottom photo, is above the left edge there where the conduit's going up. They did run a piece of copper ground wire outside, but it was not yet hooked to the ground rod they had driven in the ground. And there was no other grounding in that building. And so I had him order the 4-inch copper strap. And so we started pulling strap through there. And when we ran it outside and strapped it to the tower leg, I made sure we brushed the galvanizing, got it all clean, bolted on there. And, cold galvanizing spray is, you think it's expensive till you have to replace a bunch of copper that some thief, oh, shiny copper, got to have it. And I found out that cold galvanizing spray not only protects things, but most copper thieves look in there and they think, oh, that's a piece of old, some kind of sheet metal or something. It doesn't really get their attention. And as you can see, we got into the building around there and haloed the building. And the next thing I did was brought the grounds along the strap, got everything soldered, so everything's on a common bonded ground there. And he's had lots of lightning storms down there, but his transmitter's never taken a hit.
Yep. Yep. Good grounded, keep them cool, keep them clean, keep them well grounded is pretty much all you can ask for. And on the grounding, of course, grounds work better if you actually do connect them.
Yeah. Mike Patton actually, I think, was the one that spotted this when we were down there doing some work on the 2 AM transmitters in that building. And he looked over and saw that. And I'll be the first to admit, I had not noticed it. I did not know that there was two ground cables that had been put in by another engineer who, was working in stages. Those things happen. And he didn't get back over there. And we realized that those two cables were supposed to be soldered to that copper strap. And so Mike and his guy took care of that. I brought my map torch over and we got that taken care of. And consequently, we haven't had as much damage or problems at that site as we'd had before, because we have an SX5A that really was enjoying blowing up $700 capacitors.
Yeah.
And we haven't had any trouble since.
Right. And that's one of them, it's not brand specific at all. I mean, if you don't have, and it's one of them things that's just easy to forget. You get in the rush of doing an install. Can we get it on the air? You took the old transmitter out. We're off the air. We got to get it up. We got to get it going. And next thing you know, it's up and on the air and you're doing the walkthrough and you just it's easy to overlook stuff like that.
It
So
is.
that's, like you say, it's good to have a couple of sets of eyes sometimes too.
Yep, that, and as you said, have a checklist. If you know you're going to have to do all these things, if one of them's going to be grounding everything, make sure you chase your grounds all the way from transmitter to electrical panel to the building bonds, and you know that you got a complete grounding system.
Now, if you go back through the archives, shoot, I want to say it was last fall sometime. Paul Tinkle was on, and Paul owns some stations and just not too far north of you, up Tennessee, and with Thunderbolt Broadcast. And Paul is the owner manager that's not afraid to get his hands dirty, and he creates a list, a checklist for managers to help them work with engineers. And so we worked together and we sort of did a combined list for engineers and managers and managing engineers and engineering managers, and pick your topic. But if you go back through the archives, we'll talk about topics like that. And one of the things is having a list of the things that you need to look at. And this was something that William had mentioned it in the advanced questions was, how do you, so here's something, folks ask me a lot, how often do I change the air filters? And I'll tell you, I don't know, because it varies from one site to the next. A perfectly sealed air conditioned site, it might be years between air filter replacements. In a outside ventilation in the middle of a cornfield in Iowa, for example, it might be days between air conditioning or between air filter replacements. So, how do you determine it? Do you just go by experience? Do you have a base guideline? What's your best way to determine how to do stuff like that?
Well, yeah, that's the thing. You have kind of a learning curve when you take over a site or you build a site, and you start figuring out how fast the filters will clog up in a building. And of course, the one of the things I've been doing is the transmitters I had that had the metal mesh filters, is I've been trying to acquire a stock of spares so that when I go to the site, I just go ahead and take a new one with me, take the old one out on the new one, or the one that I've cleaned, put a Sharpie mark on there, the date of when it was put in there, because that'll wipe off with a little bit of acetone. When you take the one out, I go clean them up. And I also use that filter clean or super clean, whatever it is they call it, the spray for those filters.
Filter coat, easy coat.
And I say the problem, it works great, but you have to keep in mind that if you put that stuff on a filter, it filters better. So if you've been putting in those metal filters and they've been lasting you 2 or 3 months before cleaning, you use that stuff, you might get a month, because dust and stuff's going to stick to it that didn't before.
Yeah.
But plus side of that is the reason it wasn't sticking to it before is it's going right through the filter and going in your transmitter.
Yep.
And it does make those things work a lot better. But yeah, I got sites that can go 4, 5, 6 months sometimes, and you take the filter out and you go, I'm going to change this. And you got some you go back and go, ooh, I should have come back in a week instead of a month, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And William Bowen mentions that Krug Cutter works great to clean the metal filters too. So there's a good point. Other thing, metal filters, of course, you use the Krug Cutter to clean them, then you give them a rinse, then you let them dry because putting them on wet and blowing water through the gear is almost as bad as blowing dust through it, maybe even worse. But then you hit them with the filter coat or easy coat, whichever it's called, the filter adhesive, the glue basically. And like you say, they'll be a whole lot more effective that way, but you are going to end up out there more often. Now, one other thing, once you've got your schedule, I like these things. This is an Echo Dot, and I unplugged it specifically because then I can say Alexa without triggering mine, although anybody listening on speaker now has, I'm sorry, I don't know what you're trying to say, going off and through the house. This thing, I've got ours programmed. They've got reminders set to tell me to change the water softener salt every 2 months, to replace the furnace filters every month. Shoot, I've got one program just to let me know when it's time to, I'm going to have to add a reminder to test the generator apparently, because that's the one area where I've been falling short. But it's like having my own personal, I won't say personal secretary, personal nagging voice. I call it my electronic conscience. But whatever you do, whether it's that, whether it's a spreadsheet, whether it's the calendar function in Outlook, whatever, you do need to have some sort of schedule for this stuff. And Dan, like you were saying, it's sort of something that you have to learn as you grow with the site. Yeah.
Yep. And of course, you have to factor in other things, like if your building is not super airtight, come spring, when you get bombed with pollen, they're going to clog up faster. Or in the summer, when you got folks bush hogging around your building, they're going to be kicking up everything from seeds to dust to dirt. And then sometimes you go through the winter, you know, and the thing will go all winter long. And every time you look at the filter, you're like, that does not need changing.
Yep.
That, and I've learned that don't buy the most expensive air filter. They don't work any better. They just cost you more money. And some of them, they've been tested, they don't have as good an airflow.
Yeah, your best bet, typically talk to your manufacturer, see what MERV rating they recommend. You know, for ours, most of the paper filters we use are MERV 8. And that's important because if you go to a MERV 13, it's got a smaller polar size and it is going to move less air through it. And that can be an issue because the back pressure means the fans die faster, means things run hotter. So, you know, there's always these, you don't just swap this out without knowing what the downstream risks are. You know,
Right.
it's sort of like going from synthetic oil in a race car engine to regular plain old 10W30. Probably not a good idea. You save a little here and pay a lot later.
Exactly.
So we mentioned earlier about the thermal imaging, and you got a whole bunch of pictures. So I just kind of merged them all together. But tell me what we're looking at.
Well, these were actually just some baseline images that I took, and these are not even the most in-depth analysis on these. And I believe it was after these I even got into using the crumpled aluminum foil and getting the background, you know, the ambient temps and everything. So you're really getting accurate readings. Takes a lot of effort. You also have to keep a can of like Johnson's foot powder with you to spray down stuff that's too shiny, as long as it's not going to cause any electrical problems or whatever. But, you know, this is a transmitter site where I'll go back in occasionally and I'll take like that top left photo, I'll take another image. And if I notice something seems to be getting a little warmer than it was before, and I've had that happen. If you're looking at the rack to the left, about halfway down, Jeff, you can probably make out the front of a VS 2.5. I noticed it was just a hair warmer than it was before, and sure enough, I needed to order some foam and replace the filter in the front, cool back down nicely. Top right there, you can see breakers for some of the transmitters that to me, they look like they were really hot, but when you start looking, they're okay. but I'll go back later and I will do images again. And if one's starting to run hotter than it was before, I'm starting to look at, do we have a problem with something before it becomes a catastrophic problem? Because as everybody knows, these things are not going to fail at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning. It's going to be 9 or 10 o'clock on a Friday night, or better yet, a Saturday night, when nothing's going to be open until Monday. And a lot of these big breakers, you have to special order them. The local electrical supply is not going to have them. And so, you know, we've looked at these, and one of the things we did based on these images, we said, these are the ones that are really taking some load and they're hot. We've ordered spares for all of them and have them at the site. The ones that stay, you know, cool as a cucumber, we're not quite as worried about.
Right. Now, Mark Henneku's asking what IR camera. I see you got the FLIR watermark on the photos, but yeah, so the ones with the thermal overlaying the visual like that, that's not something I'm familiar with. Which camera is that?
That's actually the little FLIR Pro that
Is it?
attaches to, you can download their software from their website free, which does that. And it's the FLIR tools. So go look for the FLIR tools, Jeff. That's probably what you need. And it will let you do different types of blended images. And one of the things I found is great for is when you got some of these, you know, 40 breaker panels, you stand back and you take a picture of it and you go back and look at just an infrared image. You're like, well, there's a hot spot in there, but which breaker was it?
Yeah.
Well, if you overlay the, obviously overlay the real image with the thermal or the infrared, well, it's easy. You can actually see the outline of every breaker, just like in that top left photo. You can see the outline and you can tell where Marty is, where the VS 2.5 is. You know, if there's a hot spot in there, I could walk in there right now and just eyeball that rack and know which piece of equipment, you know, I'm needing to take a closer look at. And same with the transmission line images. You can see the hot spots. Of course, keeping in mind, I had not sprayed or coated those. And if you get much into the infrared, which I love it, it's fascinating to me anyway, you know, you start learning about reflectivity and emissivity. Metal objects will reflect the ambient temperature around them. So like that bottom left image where you see a hot spot, it could be that's a hot spot, or it could be that
it's just shiny.
there is a transmitter close to it that's producing a lot of heat, and the angle of the image I'm taking there, it's just reflecting ambient heat.
Yeah.
And
I discovered that standing in front of a gloss painted metal panel one day with my infrared camera, took a picture of the panel looking to see if there was any heat being produced behind it. And my outline was perfectly reflected in the panel.
Yep. So, and FLIR's got some great stuff you can download, and other folks do too, if you're willing to do a little reading to help make your infrared imaging a lot more useful and informative, and not trip yourself up chasing down problems that don't exist or missing problems that do exist. You know, Scotch, 3M electrical tape, and like I said, something like Johnson's foot powder are your friends when you're dealing with metallic objects, as long as you're not spraying and putting it into some place that's going to do harm.
Now, I'm the guy that'll tell you, of course, I'm Canadian, and so we grow up, hockey was quite literally invented about 30 miles away from where I'm sitting. So hockey tape, it's basically cloth adhesive type tape. So totally non-reflected, sticks to just about anything, works great for stuff like that. Yeah. But yeah, absolutely, something non-reflective that'll work, and that's a good thing. One of the other things we talk about a lot is, as we're talking about maintenance and ways of getting notified about stuff, we talk about phase monitors. And then you've got a picture of one that wasn't exactly monitoring much anymore.
No, it actually took a transmitter down. As a matter of fact, the first service call I took for this particular client, which owns several stations, was an HT20, that the exciter had failed, they thought, was blowing fuses. And what I found out was that the little phase detector relay in there had failed. Popped the new one in and is working. Well, excuse me, that was on this transmitter, the one you're looking at here. The one that they had, we didn't have a spare. So I cracked that thing open, took a look at it, ran back to my lab, and the first thing I did was, if you look in that bottom right photo, see that little 33 microfarad capacitor?
Mm-hmm.
It not only do those things have a shelf life, but the manufacturer, if you see that white stuff between the resistor above it and that capacitor, they cement those two together for some reason.
Mm.
And so the heat from the resistor is getting coupled over to the capacitor to make sure it bakes sooner. And every one of these that I've had fail, you go replace that 33 microfarad capacitor and it's good to use again, which is a lot cheaper than buying new ones. As you
Yeah.
can see the dates on that one, it was put into service in March of 18. It failed in September of 19.
So a year and
And
a
so
half
we
later.
have
Yep.
we have a shelf full of these, but every one of them that I've repaired and put back in transmitters, they're still working. 2 or 3 years later, they're still going.
Yep.
One of the things I think you run into is you don't know how long those things have been sitting on the shelf before you get them. And it's one of those kind of things you think, oh, well, I'm ordering one, I'll order 5. Well, downside of stocking them and keeping them on the shelf is electrolytic capacitors. You check with the manufacturers, a lot of them are rated 10 to 12 years of shelf life,
Yeah.
even when they're not being used. So if it sits on a shelf for 5 years, you can bet it's not going to last you as long as if you had ordered one that had recently been manufactured.
All
So
right.
sometimes
Especially, yeah,
it's
the
not good to keep
electrolytics. Yeah, the electrolyte will dry out on those things pretty good. And a lot of it depends on how they're stored, whether it's vertical or horizontal too. So that
Yep.
matters because you can't know without looking inside exactly how it's positioned in the relay itself. Oh, this one really intrigued me, and I don't know if it's Dawn dish soap or not, but I see the bubbles, and I'm here to tell you, bubbles on a hard line usually aren't a good sign.
No, this one, they knew that they had a slow leak in the transmission line, and it's one of those things that we've still got some major work to do on the tower. So we're going to get a tower crew in hopefully in the spring to totally redo this line. But I was losing, to start with, when I started maintaining that site and those transmitters, a nitrogen tank would last a couple of months. We'd gotten down to the point where they weren't making it 2 weeks. And they told me they thought there might be a problem somewhere in the area of that elbow. Well, sure enough, I went out there and I started spraying it. That was dawn. That was before I started buying the cow blue. Trust me, the cow blue, those bubbles you see in that upper right picture, they would be bigger than that bolt and nut right there. That stuff bubbles great. I don't know
Hmm.
exactly what they make it, but I do like it better than dawn. That's what I keep now. But you can see where the bubbles are. And if you look at that photo at the bottom right, that hole is so small, you never would have seen it just kind of eyeballing it.
Right.
But it was a flaw in the weld. And it was to the point that once I found that, I've got an ultrasonic leak detector. And I took it out there and it could hear the leak. But you put your finger or anything over it, you wouldn't know it. And it
Right.
was actually dirty. I had wiped this down before I sprayed it. You know, a little bit of dirt on top of that hole, you just don't know it's there. And
Hmm.
so everything that I could reach without having to climb up the tower with full rigging gear, I sprayed it and checked, and that was the only leak I found. Although if you'll notice down there below the nut in the upper right photo, if you notice there's a little bit of a bubble right there too.
Yep.
And so I'm guessing that it might not be either the O-rings going bad or the tension, the torque on the bolts might not be exactly right. So another thing we've got to address, but I wound up managing to seal that one up with rubber sealant and clamps, but it's another one of those that, you know, we're going to have to spend some money with the tower crew redoing hangers and checking every section, every interconductor, every bullet. You know, they've all got to be piece by piece checked, and that ain't cheap.
Nope. Well, and I mean, it's what do they say? Everything comes down to time or money, and in a lot of cases, in most cases, time is money. Mark Crichton's asking, what's the name of the leak detection fluid? Is Calgon Blue or something? What was that?
It's just called Cal Blue. I think I've got some on a shelf while you're talking in a second. If you want, Jeff, I'll see if I can grab the bottle and hold it up. But it's just called Cal Blue. Just check with any of your HVAC supply places. And a lot of them that won't sell you parts and stuff will sell this to the public.
Hmm.
And I think it cost me about $30 for a quart. I've been using that same quart bottle for, I guess, close to 2 years now, because it doesn't take much. You spray it on there. It's a little thicker and more syrupy than using Dawn and water. And so, like in this case, I sprayed it on the top of the flange. It ran its way around. You can take your finger and kind of smear it if you want to. But it's Cal Blue.
All right, very good. So there you go, Mark, and that's a good one to look for. Now back to the thermal imaging. As you can see, I kind of jumped around a little on these pictures as I saw them. But
Okay.
this is another example of something that looks a little warm. And is this the one where you were thinking you had the emissivity, the reflection?
Well, no. Well, that one has a little bit of emissivity, but that's actually, and it looks like it's scorching hot compared to everything else. But keeping in mind, if you
It's
look
relative,
at the table
yeah.
up there at the top left, what the temperatures are, SP4 is at the ceiling is 70.9 Fahrenheit, and that SP1 on the transmission line is 88.2. That's the elbow on a system that's doing about 28.4 to 28.6 kilowatts.
Right.
And elbows tend to be sort of hot spots. Anytime there's a transition or a turn in a line, they can kind of be hot spots. But that one, you'll notice that that's a warm spot. And also, if you look over there where it's going up into the coax switch for the 2 transmitters and 2 dummy loads, you got a warm spot there too. And that really wasn't a reflection versus emissivity issue. That one's actually relatively warmer at that spot.
The one good thing, and this is where it comes back to, it's almost like taking the monitor points for the old AM transmitters where you use a little tape X on the floor to give you a guide point where to stand. But if you get the shot from the same angle consistently over time, then you'll have a benchmark. And if you come back around about the same time of year next year and get the same picture again and it looks the same, that's a good sign. If it looks a whole lot hotter, that's not so much a good sign.
Yeah. And another thing about, like, when you see an image like that, if you're looking at your FLIR camera and it looks hot, it does pay to shoot it from a different angle.
Yep.
Because sometimes that will cut down on how much of the thermal reflection you're seeing. And it's just like the sun hitting. I don't even try to do a transmission line outdoors in daytime. It's going to drive the FLIR camera crazy. But I will do them at night. And you go out there and you don't have the sun bearing down on it, it makes a difference.
I'm going to get Ed here. Brian's throwing up a Canadian supplier for the, let's see, it says Calgon New 4182-08, but a Partstown link. So maybe Ed, you could throw that in the chat, might help somebody out too. And moving forward, here we go. So electrical connections, this is an ongoing thing. If you've got a compression connection and anytime you got stranded wire going into something that needs to be tightened down, you need to go in on a regular basis and check it out. And this is why right here.
Yeah, wound up having to rob another old decommissioned CCA for a lot of parts due to that one right there. It went down and didn't take long when we opened the back door to figure out, yeah, we have a problem.
Yep. Yeah, folks, we hit the top of the hour. Of course, we're going to keep going because we've never finished on time before. I don't see any reason to start today. We'll be wrapped up probably in the next 10 minutes or so. If anybody does have to disappear, we do archive these. You'll be able to find it on our website. I'll mention that again at the end of the session. And Ed's got the link in the chat for that. Now, moving forward, see that my wife laughs because in our house I handle spiders and creepy crawly bugs. She handles the snakes because I spent enough years traipsing through countries where anything that slithered was toxic or venomous of one way or another. I don't do snakes really well, and and then you're encountering these in the transmitters. Don't do that to me.
Yeah, this is a Harris, the high voltage power supply for Harris HT25 that I got a call one day that, hey, the 80 amp breaker at the front wall tripped on this thing. Well, it just never happens. That thing doesn't trip, And I was in Mobile, I'm 3-4 hours away. So I called my buddy Terry Harper, you may know, a colleague of mine down here. Well, he was in Montgomery working on television stations, new studios. So I told the chief operator, I said, look, go to the site, try turning the breaker back on one time, see if the transmitter starts, because I have seen problems with the arc gaps, particularly in the Harris transmitters where they use 2 acorn nuts and an adjustable bolt. And I told him, I said, it could be that the arc gap, just tripped. So I go in there late one night, put them on the backup. Well, in that top left photo, I could not see before I started in there with the shop vac all behind the capacitor and the transformer. So I did what we push everybody to do, use your cell phone. I hold over there and take a picture, and then I get the picture that's at the right hand side there, and I'm like, there's a piece of old cable or wire in there. And I'm like, wait a minute, Harris doesn't use fabric coated wire. And when I zoomed in, I saw it at the bottom left. I said, I think he had a really bad day when he crawled across that capacitor over there, because he was nice and stiff with his eyes bugged out. And I did clean it up. As you can see, it was all dusty and dirty in there. Check the arc gap. Everything's been fine. Transmitter's never tripped again. And I think I sent you a picture of that, Jeff, but I found a white cardboard box, and I put that snake in that box and labeled it snake from HVPS with the station's call signs, left it right in the middle of the desk. Lots of things have gotten misplaced, picked up, or walked away at that site. That box
Not that box.
Still on the desk.
Yep. Yeah, we were talking about documenting earlier, and Curtis mentions that take pictures of everything, anchor points, transmission lines, cables, interior, exterior, everything, and store them on Dropbox. And that way you can see any changes from one visit to the next. And that's another real good point. It's like I said, we do a lot of talking about visual checks and, just the necessity of being there to do the walk around. But if you don't have a photographic record, it's easy to miss something that changed from this visit to the last visit, over and above, things like meter readings and coax security and things like that. I mean, there could be some stuff that you didn't catch. Little things like the smoke detector walking away.
Yeah, you walk in and look up the ceiling and you see that and you go, this isn't good. One of those cases where the battery was dead, and to stop it from chirping, somebody takes it down, takes the battery out, leaves it on the desk. And I'm like, that's why you carry several 9-volt batteries. You see it, you fix it, you walk away, or at least when you change your clocks, at time change for daylight savings time or whatever, change those batteries. And another thing, I've got some of the BE transmitters and some of the Harris that like to use 9-volt backup batteries in there. They're easily forgotten about. Nothing fails. You don't open it up. You don't think about that 9-volt battery until the transmitter goes down and it doesn't kick back up when the power kicks on,
Yeah. Well, I mean, some of our older gear has controller batteries, has some of the newer stuff too. But for us, we try to use it just to hold the status of alarm lights, not to the operating power. That said, the batteries do need to be swapped out on a fairly regular basis. And having it on Mark's mentioned the same thing in the comments, change the battery in your transmitter, and it should be done on a schedule. Again, whether you do it once a year, may do it once every 2 years if the transmitter's almost always on, it depends. Again, you'll define the schedule based on your own particular site and circumstances, but you do need to have a schedule.
And again, it made me think, I like to label things on the front of the transmitters. When the tube was put in, that kind of thing, you want your TPO, your efficiency. Probably not a bad idea to spend a few more cents on a white label that says battery changed. And then the next time you look at the front of that transmitter, you got a visual reminder of there's a battery in here.
I was at a site in Texas. I think it was Dallas. Shout out to Armando and his crew if they happen to catch this or the archive. But I mean, the front of the transmitter had about 6 rows of white Brady label, P-Touch label tape on it. And it was like when the battery was changed, when the air filter was changed, field upgrades that have been done. Just, it was a at a glance written record of the status of that piece of equipment. And they had one on every major piece of equipment in the facility. Again,
Yeah.
it was a dream. If you were walking in there as a contract guy covering for somebody who was off sick or on vacation, I mean, it just make life so much easier.
Yeah, and if you don't want to spend the money on the little P-Touch labels, keep a roll of cheap painter's tape and a Sharpie marker and just write it and stick it to the front of the transmitter, and it'll peel off easy enough the next time you need to replace it. So.
Yep, or things like air filters, you can just write it right on the air filter the housing itself, or
Yep.
on the air filter itself rather. William mentions it's a good idea too to put what type of battery it uses. And
Yep.
that's a good point, because I mean, you look at some of our newer boxes, they use coin cells for controller memory, and it's it's a CR2032. I know that because I've done it more than once. But yeah, somebody again walking in blind, if you've got it written, then they're not going to have to tear it apart to figure out what battery it is, and then shut it down and put it back together and go get the battery, et cetera, and so on. So yep, very good point there. Um, some of the other stuff for the visuals, that flash technology controller looks like it's seen better days.
Yeah, they love
The
to use those
housing.
plastic closures and have you mount them outside on the tower leg. Guaranteed that the weather is going to dry rot it. It's going to crack. First hailstorm, it's going to bust. We said enough is enough. We got tired of buying $600 and $700 boards in each one of them. So for what 2 of those boards would cost us, we had the portable building place bring us out of building. We bought a little AC panel, moved the AC wiring inside, put those things inside, and yeah, a lot less trouble than what we were going through before, because we were constantly having to fix those things.
Yeah, and I mean, the other advantage to it there, blue box at the base of a tower is a really nice little sharpshooter target for somebody that's trying to sight in their deer gun. Not that that
Yeah,
ever
and
happens
there's
to their
all the
tower
holes
sites.
underneath for the wiring access where the cables can go in. It's
Yeah,
also very inviting to wasps. They love
yep,
to build, and
yep.
bees and stuff love to build inside those things.
hmm Oh, flicking back, sorry, I kind of skipped over this one. Jerry asked, what was that loop on the tower photo? Well, Jerry, that's why we do visual checks right there. That's a
Well, this is
STL cable,
also
isn't
one of
it?
those, yeah, it's one of those cases where an engineer started a job and didn't finish. And this was, I get a call on Friday afternoon about 4 o'clock for a station about 150 miles away who couldn't get anyone else and they were desperate. The STL 7/8 inch corrugated coax broke loose, took part of the pigtail from the STL antenna with it, and not only fell, but it belly wrapped over 2 sections of guy wire. And
Hmm.
so they were off the air. And that was at 4 o'clock. About 9 o'clock that night, pair of tower riggers showed up. About 2 o'clock the next morning, we got them back on the air. Believe it or not, we cut, because this thing was all messed up. You weren't reusing this. We didn't have the stuff to rerun the line all the way up there. So they were just going to put new cable and STL up, or microwave antenna, the next week. Fortunately, they're only like 3 miles away from the STL transmitter in the studios. So what we did was we sawed the cable in half, and I've got a piece of stranded copper wire, stripped both ends, made a loop, twisted the ends together, and I had the rigger hold it up to the side of the tower and jam that wire down in the center conductor and just hold it against the side of the tower. Boom, we had enough STL signal to get back on the air. I said, you tape that all together very carefully and tape about 6 feet of that coax to the side of that tower so nothing can move. So he was going to get his other engineer out of South Alabama to come up there the next week. They ran like that for about 3 months,
Yep.
stayed on the air. But the backstory to this is the engineer who put the STL up said, okay, it's up, it's on the air. I got to come back tomorrow and finish strapping the 7/8 to the tower. He
Mm-hmm.
didn't. The only thing holding the 7/8, about 250 feet of it, was the end connector on the pigtail of the antenna.
Yep. Yeah.
And so
Stuff like,
it was going to go.
and it's like we were saying earlier, there's nothing more permanent than radio station temporary.
Yeah.
So last picture you sent me was one of the scarier ones. I'm going to tell a story about a site I ran into, a couple of states west of you, where they called me in to just sort of look around and do a site inspection, and saw some rust. There's a non-galvanized, a painted steel tower, and I saw some rust on it, and I grabbed a stick and kind of scraping to see how, surface rust, and the stick went right into the tower leg, and I said, all right, I need to be about that many feet plus 10 away from here. So yeah, this is something that can get a little frightening when you see this on a tower.
Yeah, because like I was saying before the start of the webinar, and all, that's the kind of thing that when a crew comes out to work on it, and if they haven't consulted with a mechanical engineer and everything, or a structural engineer and everything, I don't want to be there when they say, oh, all we got to do is replace that brace. There's a reason that brace is there. And I don't really want to be, I'm like you, I give more than 10 feet of safety margin probably. I don't want to be there when they come up with another brace and they say, okay, let's take these 2 nuts off. I'm like, well, I would think that if it was okay without it being there, it wouldn't have had to be there to start with.
Yeah,
I don't really want
there's
to.
a reason.
I don't want to be around when you start taking structural support members off.
There's a reason they put those big intricate clamping assemblies around the towers when stuff like that's getting replaced. And even then, there's there've been a few mishaps. So definitely that's something I'm going to leave to the pros. But yep, absolutely. So this let's see, we ran about a couple of minutes past our usual couple of minutes overtime, but it's been a lot of fun. Folks, as I said earlier, this webinar, as with all Nautel webinars, will be archived. You can hit the resources tab on our website and get there from there. You can go to our YouTube channel. The TTT sessions have their own playlist, I think. There's the Waves newsletter. You can usually link to stuff through there when that comes out next. Online info like the Broadcaster's Desktop Resource, broadcastengineering.info, umpteen Facebook pages for any topic known to man. There's a plethora, that's my big word for today, of information out there. You just got to know where to look. So on that note, I want to thank the folks that hung with us to the very end. Dan, I want to thank you very much for spending so much time with us today. It's been a whole lot of fun.
And thank you as well, Jeff, and I wish you and everyone in the group a safe, happy, and very enjoyable Thanksgiving. And it's kind of nice that a lot of us are able to see family that we haven't been able to get together with in possibly a couple of years now. So.
Yep, for sure. I know I got a turkey in the fridge. As I said, I've got the honor or the privilege of being able to celebrate Thanksgiving both here in Canada and, because my wife's from Wisconsin, the U.S. Thanksgiving. So it's definitely going to be a good turkey program, or a good turkey day, if you will. So on that note, folks, I want to thank you all very, very much and have a wonderful and just excellent week. We'll talk to you next week. Bye now.